May 31st, 2013. The air over central Oklahoma was thick, heavy, and electric. It was a day that would leave a permanent scar on the landscape and an even deeper one on the soul of the storm-chasing community. In the final, terrifying moments, as a monster vortex of impossible scale churned the earth, a storm chaser's radio crackled with a voice strained by sheer terror. "We are in a very, very bad spot right now. It's coming right for us." That was the moment the hunted became the hunted. The beast that day would become the widest tornado ever recorded in history. A behemoth of such staggering power and unpredictable fury that it would not only kill, but it would rewrite the rules of an already dangerous game. To understand the horror of that Friday evening, we have to go back. So, let's go back to where it all began. The stage for May 31st was not set in a vacuum. It was built upon a foundation of recent trauma and lingering fear. Just 11 days prior, on May 20th, 2013, a vicious EF5 tornado had carved a 17-mile-long path of utter annihilation through the heart of Moore, Oklahoma. It had pulverized 2 elementary schools, flattened entire neighborhoods into fields of splinters, and claimed 24 lives. The wounds were still raw. The sound of sirens still echoed in the collective memory. Oklahoma was a community on edge, acutely aware of what the sky was capable of. This recent catastrophe created a volatile psychological atmosphere. The public was hypervigilant, perhaps too much so. The memory of Moore would later play a critical role in the decisions made by hundreds of people on May 31st, decisions that, for some, would prove fatal. In the days leading up to the 31st, meteorologists watched their computer models with a growing sense of dread. The data was not just suggestive of severe weather, it was screaming it. An incredibly potent atmospheric setup was taking shape. A dry line, the sharp boundary between moist Gulf air to the east and arid desert air to the west, was draped across the southern plains. To its east, the air was a powder keg. Meteorologists use a term called CAPE, or convective available potential energy, to measure the instability in the atmosphere. On a day with a CAPE value of 2,000, severe storms are likely. On this day, the values were projected to soar past 5,000, even 6,000. It was, in technical terms, a loaded gun environment. The Storm Prediction Center, or SPC, the nation's leading authority on severe weather forecasting, began issuing stark warnings. They outline a large moderate risk area over central Oklahoma, a 4 out of 5 on their severity scale. Within that area, they highlighted a significant threat for strong, long-track tornadoes. The language was clear, professional, and deeply unsettling. One of their technical discussions noted the potential for a few tornadoes, some of which could be intense. For the hundreds of storm chasers who flocked to Tornado Alley each spring, these were the days they lived for. They came from all over the world: scientists, photographers, thrill seekers, and television crews. Among them was one of the most respected figures in the field, Tim Samaras. Samaras was not a reckless adrenaline junkie. He was a meticulous engineer and scientist, the founder of a research team called TwistX. His life's work was to get closer to tornadoes than anyone else, not for fame, but for data. He designed and built his own probes, heavy, aerodynamically sound instruments designed to be placed in a tornado's path to measure wind speed, pressure, and temperature from inside the vortex itself. His data had revolutionized the scientific understanding of tornadoes, and he was known for his caution. He had a reputation for rigorous safety protocols, for planning every move, for respecting the power he studied. On the morning of May 31st, he was in Oklahoma with his 24-year-old son, Paul, a talented photographer and videographer, and his longtime chase partner, Carl Young, a meteorologist. They were a seasoned, professional team, among the best in the world at what they did. As the afternoon wore on, the sky began to change. The cap, a layer of warm air aloft that had been suppressing storm development, began to erode. It was like the lid being taken off a boiling pot. At 3:30 p.m., the SPC elevated their outlook, issuing a PDS tornado watch. PDS, a particularly dangerous situation. This is a rare and severe alert, reserved for days when forecasters have high confidence in the development of multiple violent tornadoes. The watchbox text was chillingly specific, warning of the potential for tornadoes with damage paths exceeding 2 miles in width. It was a prophecy. By late afternoon, towering cumulonimbus clouds exploded into the upper atmosphere west of Oklahoma City. They were magnificent and terrifying, their anvil tops spreading for miles across the sky. Around 5 p.m., one storm in particular, southwest of the town of El Reno, began to show signs of organization. On radar, it developed a classic hook echo, the telltale signature of a rotating mesocyclone, the parent circulation from which a tornado is born. The chasers began to converge. It was a swarm of activity. Dozens of vehicles, bristling with antennas and meteorological instruments, jockeyed for position on the rural grid of farm roads. Among them were the Weather Channel, with meteorologist Mike Betts in their heavily armored tornado hunt vehicle. Reed Timmer was there in his Dominator tank, and Tim Samaras, Paul Samaras, and Carl Young were there in their white Chevrolet Cobalt. At 6:03 p.m., it happened. A funnel cloud descended from the dark, churning base of the supercell. It touched the earth. The El Reno tornado was born. In its first moments, it was not the monster it would become. Eyewitness video from this time shows a series of smaller, writhing vortices, a so-called multi-vortex tornado. It was large and dangerous, but looked, to the experienced eye, somewhat manageable. It was tracking in a predictable, easterly direction. The chase was on. The goal was to stay to its south or southeast, allowing for a clear view while maintaining a safe escape route. This was standard procedure. But this tornado was not standard. It was an anomaly, a predator that refused to follow the rules. At 6:19 p.m., the beast began to transform. It underwent a period of explosive intensification that stunned even the most veteran observers. In the span of less than 10 minutes, the tornado swelled from a collection of smaller funnels into a single, massive, wedge-shaped vortex, more than a mile wide. And then it kept growing. It began to ingest the parent mesocyclone, essentially merging with its own engine of destruction. The visual presentation became deeply confusing. The tornado was so enormous and so wrapped in rain and debris that it no longer looked like a tornado. It looked like a low-hanging, turbulent wall of cloud, a dark abyss descending to the ground. It became nearly impossible to tell where the tornado ended and the storm began. From a distance, one chaser was heard on his radio asking, "Is that it? The whole thing?" The whole mesocyclone is on the ground. And then it did the unthinkable. It made a sharp, unpredictable turn. It veered from its easterly path and began to track north, and then northeast, accelerating rapidly. This was the fatal move. This sudden shift in direction and speed cut off the primary escape route for dozens of chasers who were positioned to its north and east, believing they were in a safe location. The grid of rural roads, which a moment before had been a map to safety, suddenly became a trap. Panic erupted. Radio communications, once calm and professional, became a frantic cacophony of desperate warnings. It's turning. It's turning north. Everybody north of the tornado needs to go east now. It's huge. I don't know where the edge is. The monster was now moving over 40 miles per hour, its outer circulation expanding even faster. It was no longer just a tornado. It was a spinning planetary gear of death, 26 miles wide at its peak. Within this vast, churning mass were multiple, smaller, incredibly intense subvortices. These were tornadoes within the tornado, and they were orbiting the center at speeds of over 100 miles per hour. Mobile Doppler radar units, including one from the University of Oklahoma, measured winds in these subvortices at an astonishing 295 miles per hour. These were EF5 level winds, some of the highest velocities ever detected on Earth. The tornado was now a predator, and its hunting ground was the web of country roads south of El Reno. The team from the Weather Channel found themselves directly in its path. Their vehicle, a Chevrolet Suburban modified to withstand extreme winds, was no match. Mike Betts, broadcasting live, could only describe the horror as it unfolded. "It is unbelievable how big this is," he said, his voice tight with adrenaline. Moments later, the tornado struck. Their live feed cut out, but the internal cameras kept rolling. The footage is pure chaos. The vehicle is lifted, rolled, and thrown 200 yards into a field. The sound is a deafening roar of wind and shattering glass. Inside, the crew is tossed around like rag dolls. When the vehicle finally comes to rest, mangled and destroyed, Bet's voice returns, shaken and raw. "Oh my God, I don't know if I can do this anymore. This is the real deal." Miraculously, he and his crew survived, though with injuries. They were the lucky ones. Tim Samaras, Paul Samaras, and Carl Young were caught in the same deadly quadrant. Based on forensic analysis of their last known positions and the damage path, it is believed they were on a dirt road, Reuter Road, attempting to flee south. They were pioneers of science, but in that moment, they were just three men in a small car, staring down an incomprehensible force. The tornado, now at its maximum width and intensity, would have been moving toward them not as a funnel, but as a fast-moving tidal wave of debris and wind. Their vehicle, a standard passenger car, stood no chance. What happened in their final moments is unknown, but the evidence left behind tells a story of unimaginable violence. Their car was found, crushed into an unrecognizable ball of metal, less than half a mile from where it was hit. A local resident who discovered the wreckage could not even identify it as a car. The bodies of the three men were found scattered in the aftermath. Tim Samaras was found still buckled into his seatbelt inside the vehicle. Paul and Carl had been thrown from it. The news of their deaths sent a shockwave of grief and disbelief through the meteorological and storm-chasing communities. Tim Samaras was considered one of the safest, most knowledgeable chasers in the world. He was a legend. If this could happen to him, it could happen to anyone. The sense of invincibility that had subtly crept into the culture of modern storm chasing was shattered in an instant. It was a day of reckoning. But the tornado's wrath was not reserved for chasers. As it churned northeast, it crossed U.S. Highway 81. Fearing a repeat of the Moore tornado, and urged by some media outlets to evacuate, hundreds of residents from Oklahoma City and its western suburbs had gotten into their cars to flee south. They drove directly into the path of the storm. The highway became a scene of pure pandemonium. Cars were picked up and thrown from the road. Families huddled in ditches as the vortex passed over them. In total, the El Reno tornado killed 8 people. 5 of them were people in vehicles trying to escape. The very warning system designed to save lives had, in this complex and unprecedented situation, inadvertently contributed to the tragedy by creating a massive traffic jam in the path of the storm that broke all the rules. After 40 agonizing minutes, tracking for 162 miles, the tornado finally weakened and dissipated. As the skies cleared, a scene of apocalyptic ruin was revealed. But it was a strange and inconsistent ruin, because the most violent winds were confined to the small, fast-moving subvortices. The damage path was erratic. One house might be swept clean from its foundation, while the one next door had only minor damage. This created a major classification problem for the National Weather Service. Tornadoes are rated on the enhanced Fujita scale based on the damage they cause, not on their measured wind speed. Because the El Reno tornado spent most of its life over open country, it did not hit enough well-built structures to produce definitive EF5 damage. Surveyors found widespread EF3 level damage. So, officially, the El Reno tornado was rated an EF3. This became one of the storm's most controversial legacies. A tornado with documented 295-mile-per-hour winds, the second highest ever measured, was officially weaker than the Moore tornado that had struck just days before. It is a paradox that highlights the limitations of the rating system. It was a killer with EF5 winds, but it will forever be recorded in the books as an EF3. A monster hiding behind a technicality. When the final tally was taken, the statistics were staggering. 8 fatalities, over 150 injuries, a width of 26 miles, making it the largest tornado ever documented. But the true cost was not measured in numbers. It was measured in the loss of a scientific giant and his son and colleague. It was measured in the psychological trauma inflicted on those who survived being tossed by the storm. And it was measured in the profound questions it forced the entire weather community to confront. The El Reno tornado exposed the dangers of the growing chaser convergence, where hundreds of vehicles can clog rural roads, creating traffic jams that eliminate escape routes. It forced a painful conversation about the responsibility of broadcast media during a tornado emergency, questioning the wisdom of blanket evacuation orders that can put more people at risk. More than anything, it was a brutal reminder that nature does not follow a script. No amount of technology, armor, or experience can make one truly safe in the presence of a force that operates on a scale beyond human comprehension. The chasers on May 31st, 2013, went out to document a storm. They ended up being documented by it. They went looking for the heart of the beast, and some of them found it in the most tragic way imaginable. The legacy of that day is one of sorrow and of lessons learned in the hardest possible way. Memorials now stand to honor Tim, Paul, and Carl, men who died in the pursuit of knowledge, trying to unlock the secrets of the storms they so deeply respected. Their deaths served as a solemn warning that there is a fine line between observation and mortality, and that some phenomena in our world will always remain untamable, unpredictable, and utterly, terrifyingly supreme. The El Reno tornado wasn't just weather. It was a living, breathing entity of immense power that, for one terrifying evening, reminded us all of our place.